Welcome to Talk World Radio, a half-hour discussion of politics as if the people mattered. I'm David Swanson. This week on Talk World Radio, we are talking about a new documentary called An Ordinary Insanity, which you can see at anordinaryinsanity.com. It focuses on Pentagon Papers whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg's calls to action about the global threat posed by nuclear weapons. Our guest, the maker of this and quite a number of other wonderful films, is Judith Ehrlich, film director, writer, producer. Her 2009 film, The Most Dangerous Man in America, also about Daniel Ellsberg, was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature and won a Peabody Award. Judith Ehrlich, welcome to Talk World Radio.
Thank you, David. Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming on. So let's talk about An Ordinary Insanity and maybe start with where it came from and what it has to do with a place I work called Roots Action.
Right. I think it seemed you didn't know that, but I knew that this all started with Norman Solomon, who's the executive director of Roots Action, and T.M. Scruggs, and they really wanted to do a film about, Dan had not been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer yet, but he was at 92 at the time. And we thought it would be good to get an interview in the can with him talking about nuclear war, because that's really where he's focused his attention for the past many decades he's most known as the whistleblower for the Pentagon Papers, but before that, he was a nuclear war planner and trying to make it better by the nuclear war plans he was making, but realized that was impossible. And he, after the Pentagon Papers, he focused many decades resisting nuclear war, arrested over 80 times. I think we don't have a good count of that. I did say to him on his 80th birthday, I'd been told by many people 80 was the number. And he said, I said, Dan, don't get arrested between now and your birthday. It's just a few weeks away. And he said, oh, Judy, I can't do that. And he, in fact, did get arrested between then and his birthday. But he was, he actually liked getting arrested. And I'm sure you must have been arrested with him, David.
Oh, yes.
Everybody, this is the common, we were going to get a t-shirt made that said, I was arrested with Daniel Ellsberg, because there were times when thousands of people were arrested. So I think there are many thousands of people who have been arrested with him every August 6th at not Diablo Canyon, with where's Livermore Labs. And Patricia's going to be there this year, taking his place. She often went with him, but we're going to take Patricia out there this year. Anyway, so the film is about because he had so much expertise in this subject, because he had been a war planner in the White House, but the secrets he had, his actual documents, and Dan was a true believer in documents and the value and the power of documents. But the documents got blown away by an act of God. His brother took them from him for safekeeping, buried them in a dump in New York State where he lived, and they were blown away by a hurricane. You wouldn't have guessed that would happen, but anyway, it did. And so he had 2 sets of secrets in his safe, but now he was left only with the Pentagon Papers. But after he released those, after the whole drama of years of trial, etc., he went back and tried to reconstruct those nuclear secrets and wrote the book Doomsday Machine, Confessions of a Nuclear War Planner, which covers that part of his life. Since then, actually, I did want to plug the recent book, which is this, which is the son. Robert writes the foreword. His son Michael and his long-term assistant Jan are the authors of this, and I'm just reading it now, and I thought I knew everything about him, but there's so much interesting depth in who he was and how he became who he was. And it's a very good read. It's all the unpublished journals and articles that he wrote. And it's really quite a wonderful dive into somebody's psyche, especially someone like Dan.
Lots of strange background that you can speculate about how he became who he was. Was it because
Yes.
of this or that strange childhood
Yeah.
circumstance? But the message of ordinary insanity from Dan is,
Yeah.
tell me if
The
I'm
day.
wrong, that it's ordinary because everybody's in on it, but it's absolutely insane and it's an
Yeah.
urgent crisis, and we ought to be screaming and panicking and running to do something about it. And
Yeah.
instead, we treat it as ordinary, right?
Ordinary. Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And the thing that's so, you almost don't want to release this film because it's like everybody's willing to panic about the global warming and that whole crisis, and that looks pretty inevitable unless something incredible turns around, and it is possible. But I am an awful optimist, and I read all these guys, "Well, just plant a trillion trees and everything will be fine." It's like, nah, I don't think so. But so that's probably going to happen in some form or other. But this, it's like, what do you want? The slow death from global warming, or you want the fast one of nuclear war, which also it's hard to fathom to me that we haven't blown ourselves up yet. I mean, we have everything is on this very walking this incredibly thin line that we could fall off at any minute. And we've been very, very lucky that we're still here and that our planet is still here, and all our little animal friends are still here. But, as Daniel says, the zero, we have
Oh,
put it zero chance of annihilation, something less than zero chance of avoiding annihilation. And I think that it's a miracle. But he lays out the whole, you know, the specifics of what we're faced with, and it has to do with, the nine nuclear powers, but only the two of them, the Soviet Union, sorry, that shows my age, Russia and the US are the only ones that have the launch on warning system, which is basically because of ICBMs, which are these fixed target missiles, of which there are 600, and they're mostly up in Montana and Wyoming and around that part of the country. And ours are. But the Russians know where every one of ours are. And so, the idea is we'll blow them up before they blow us up. Well, there's a half an hour difference between those two. If it goes in both directions. There's no question about that. So the idea that being first is going to make any difference is completely ridiculous, but we hold on to that belief. And so what we're really hoping to do with this film is get people to face the fact that we have got to get rid of these ICBMs. And
can,
on
can
the other
can
hand,
I just
yes, go
ask a
ahead.
crazy question?
No, nothing's.
Given what we now know
Yeah,
about nuclear winter,
yes,
were the Russians or the United States to attack,
yes,
it would all be over whether or not the other one attacked in half an hour later, right? I
right,
mean,
right,
the rush to get in on it and be part of pushing the button to destroy the world because the world's already guaranteed to be destroyed. This
exactly,
second strike, it's as
exactly,
insane as the first strike, right?
exactly. And as Dan puts it, 98% of life on Earth would be extinguished because of it's 70% of sunlight would be reduced by the fallout and the result of nuclear war.
Blacked out for months. Yeah.
Yeah, and years. Yeah, and by the in 98% of people would be dead in a year because of starvation. So it's not, it's going to be a fast and then slow thing we're looking at here. So it's, and then when he was in the Eisenhower administration making plans for nuclear war. And what he saw their plans was 600 million people killed by nuclear war. He thought that was the most evil planning ever. But then it doesn't until 1983 when that we know about nuclear winter. And then it's inevitable that the whole a large animal population on the planet will be destroyed, and
Yeah.
probably not the planet itself, but the everything living on large living. I guess insects and things will live. Anyway, but watching too much of David Attenborough.
Not I'm not sure we have
Maybe not.
any basis for thinking anything will survive
Yeah, probably
contact
nothing
with
will.
man.
Dan sort of points out the large animals, but at any rate, it is not a pretty picture. The fact that we're not building bomb shelters in our backyard. I mean, we have more reason to be building bomb shelters than we did in the 50s, but we, got onto that as a danger, and the Cold War made everybody worried about it, but people aren't worried about it, and it's even more of a threat than it was then. So what we're hoping for is that people get organized, and we are having very good response to this, and a lot of people are watching it and talking about it. But we're trying to focus, like Back from the Brink has 5 points they're focusing on. We're hoping that people will push their congresspeople and anyone that will listen to them to get rid of the ICBMs, and the plan to modernize the Minuteman missiles and the ICBM system, which is called Sentinel. And that is like, now I can't even keep up with the numbers on what the budget is now, but it's like 1.5 trillion or something. Anyway, it's a huge amount of money. It could be used to feed people and educate them if we cared about
Transform
that
our
anymore.
lives.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway,
Judy,
I think there's a goal to this film. And the film is, it's got entertainment value of some sort in the beautiful animation, but it's,
yes.
really got a goal of organizing people around this issue.
Judith, I live here in Virginia, very close to one of these hills where they plan to stash part of the important people who matter prior to a nuclear war under in this hollowed out hill, right? And I've
Right.
never understood the we'll only have minutes of warning or we'll only have a half an hour of warning. They would need hours of warning to gather up all these different agencies and stick them in all these different hills that are 100 or 200 miles from Washington. I mean, it's got to be that they're thinking about a planned, decided upon, unnecessary first strike, right?
I think this is just my opinion. That's why we're building the ballroom, is because that's the plan for the ballroom. That's going to be under the ballroom is going to be where they're going to stash all those guys. But and they are all
Everybody
guys. Yeah,
get rid of
yeah,
all the
yeah. They're
hills.
all the top guys are going to be in the ballroom, under the ballroom. But yes, absolutely. There's it's not, none of those things make any sense. That's why it's such an ordinary insanity. It's not like anything's going to be left to come out to after you've been hidden in the ballroom, under the ballroom. You come out to a devastated environment, and,
Yeah, nothing
everyone
to eat, nothing to drink.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing to eat or drink. That too.
and
Well,
and so the goal is to get rid of the ICBMs, the targets that don't move, that create this panic. But the reality it mentioned in the film is that China is moving in the direction of the insanity of Russia and the United States and having these
Yeah.
launch on warning missiles ready to go.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Has China done
I'm
that?
not sure they're ready to go, or they're moving in the direction of being ready to go. I mean, they're definitely getting the picture that they don't want to be the odd man out. It's like, if Russia has these and we have them, then they ought to have them too. And, I think after their they certainly are, coming up in the world in terms of their power versus the other powers.
Yeah,
So it makes sense they would think that, why not? Why not play with the big boys?
because it's
So, I mean,
insane.
hey, if they got them, we got them. So, I mean, I think all of that is possible. All of that but the point of, if you get rid of the ICBMs, you don't have the 10-minute warning, you don't have the panic. All the other weapons, as awful as they are, the planes dropping bombs, the submarines launching bombs, those can all be turned around. Well, not the missiles once they go, but the most of those weapons can be turned around, and
Planes on the ships, yeah.
yes, from not yeah, they don't. The problem with the ICBMs is, once they get the warning, it's all about speed and getting them first, and that's like a 10-minute warning, and
Yeah.
that's the real immediate danger. The whole system is a ridiculous danger and a ridiculous waste of money, and it's only the Defense Department. clients, with the the providers of these weapons are the only ones who win.
Mhm.
And Dan does say it would be more cost effective to dismantle all of them than to keep going. They could put all the guys at whatever, I'm blanking on the name, Raytheon and blah blah blah, and Boeing, and
Sure.
get them to, instead of make these missiles, make these weapons, dismantle them. That would keep them busy and keep them paid for quite a long time, and do that instead. They don't have
Oh,
to
I
give
would,
up their
yeah.
salaries.
If we're gonna waste all our money, I'd rather have it spent on digging holes in the ground than building these things. But
Exactly, exactly.
we are speaking with Judith Ehrlich about the film An Ordinary Insanity, and you can go to anordinaryinsanity.com and see it. But Judith, this is just one of a series of films you've made about Dan Ellsberg, which is part of a larger series
Yeah.
of films you've made about war and peace and conscientious objection and counter recruitment. Can you
Yes.
talk a
I've
little
been
bit about all of these Dan Ellsberg films and where they come from?
I know it's so weird. I never thought I'd be spending a good decades of my life documenting Dan Ellsberg, but it seems that I have. I mean, if there's anyone worthy of that, it is Dan in my mind. So, I did want to say one thing about An Ordinary Insanity. It's free. It's on YouTube. It's on Vimeo. It's online at our website. And it's the point is to get it out there. So if you're interested in the subject and you want to share it with other people, it is meant to be shared at no cost to anyone. So please do look at it and share it with your group of your faith group or your communist cell. I don't know, whatever, whatever organization you belong to. I shouldn't have said that, but for your DSA chapter. Uh, the other films, I got kind of dragged into this by Ron Dellums and 10 other peace groups. This is in the 80s. They wanted to make a film about counter recruitment. And so I came in to help them with that. And it was used for years. It was a slideshow. At that point, I was making 20 projector slideshows, which were a terrible technology. All you had to do is have one slide not drop, and everything was totally awful. Anyway, so this was just two projector slideshows. They used it, peace groups around the country used it for quite a few years to organize to basically give young people information about what recruiters say to them, what the truth is of what they're offering them.
Yeah.
So that went on for a while, and then I made a film. My first PBS film was with Rick Tejada Flores, and we made a film called The Good War and Those Who Refused to Fight It. And making that, I met a lot of my heroes for life, Dave Dellinger and Bill Sutherland, and you probably know of or know these folks. I was just reading Dan's book. He quotes Dave Dellinger, the page I'm on right now. He's talking about Dave Dellinger, anyway, a great peace activist and elevated human.
Call it the
And
good war because everybody's taught that it's holy and sacred and nothing wrong with it. And you wouldn't imagine anyone had gone to jail rather than have the glory of killing in it. And yet these people suffered horribly instead of engaging in it. And they created the civil rights movement in the prisons and coming out of it.
and the anti-apartheid movement and the co-op movement. And I mean, the legacy of these resistors was amazing. Plus 35,000 legal conscientious objectors were sent to these camps that were run by the government and the peace churches, and the Catholics had one that didn't last very long, but it was the Quakers and the Brethren and Mennonites had camps, but mostly government camps. And there they were tucked away in remote places in Oregon. That Walboro was a camp where they had an art camp and they put on theater productions and had a printing press, which I almost bought at one time. But anyway, there were a great bunch of really amazing artists. The poet, William Everson, Brother Antoninus was one. A lot of it was they came back to San Francisco and started the Beat movement, basically from Marlboro. But a lot of the camps, they basically had a lot of time on their hands, and they were committed to doing as little as possible. There's some great footage of them like laying on the ground with teaspoons and digging holes. I mean, they didn't want to be productive. They were, prisoners, but not, in prison. And but they had a lot of time to talk, and they had a lot of time to plan, and they had a lot of time to figure out what they believed in. So when these guys came out of these camps, they were a force to be reckoned with, and they really did change the course of post-war America. So
Where
that's a
can
story that hasn't been
people
told.
where can people see that film?
It's a Bullfrog Films is our distributor for that, and they have it. And there's you can show it to groups for more money than you probably want to spend, but you can also get a private copy of it. And is it on our? We don't really have a working website on that anymore. That's the only place to get it now. It may have been. It's probably been stolen and up on YouTube, but it's called The Good War and Those Who Refuse to Fight It.
And you also did a film related to the war in Vietnam, right?
Right. That's more recent. The first I did the one on Dan, the most dangerous man in America, Daniel Ellsberg, in the Pentagon Papers. And that's the one that we sort of hit the jackpot with in terms of, Emmy and Oscar nomination and Peabody, and 27 countries had it on their public television stations. And we had it here on PBS twice, and with a big panel from the New York Times. So that was successful by documentary,
Yeah.
uh, in my world. Um, but so that was great, and it just caught and really Dan and Patricia and I traveled for a long time with that film, and so we got to be close from that experience. And then what was I going to say? That was about Dan's experience as a whistleblower and the legacy of whistleblowing. And since then, I've been working on a film which isn't finished, but it includes an interview with Edward Snowden and the producers of this film, which is about Assange. And Dan introduced me to Assange and wanted me to make a film about him because he liked the film I made about Dan. So that didn't work, but I did. Oh, what is that? Something I did with my hands. Something's just happened on this that I don't understand. Um,
It's quite okay. Radio
yeah,
listeners can't see it.
yes, it's radio listeners. You didn't see this weird thing just happened. Anyway, so that evolved into a film about one of Assange's accomplices, who was a member of parliament in Iceland. Her name's Birgitta Jonsdottir, and it's about her and all the amazing things she did, the pirate party in Iceland, and the way Iceland wrote a crowdsourced constitution. And there's a lot of really interesting elements, but it's also a history of the internet because she was an early adapter, the first woman to do a website in Iceland and the first person internationally to do an online poetry slam. So she's a really interesting character. And so I did an interview with Snowden, who worked with her and or knew her, and they collaborated. And now some people, my producers in France working on that film, want to make that film into a film about Dan and Snowden. And because I had an interview with Snowden about the interview about Snowden turned out to be an interview with Snowden about Dan mostly.
Uh,
And then I had an interview with Dan when Snowden came out. So I have these two interviews that kind of make the core of it. And they've got these AI experts who want to use some of the material from this new book and use Dan's words with the perfect AI voice of Dan. I'm not sure what I think about that, but I think it's the idea of it being, it'll be totally authentic and nothing's going to be made up. It's just a way to use his voice from beyond the grave. So they're working on that. I'm getting dragged into it, but
I'm guessing that Snowden spoke about Dan as something of an inspiration.
very much an inspiration. Yeah. And it was, I mean, it really, I mean, he claims that seeing our film, The Most Dangerous Man, is what caused him to do what he did. And he said that in public many times. And that was like inspirational to me. I thought, wow, that's really cool. But
That's
he's a
old, right?
lovely fellow and he's so articulate. And who knows what, I've talked, he's stuck in Russia, but he's making the best of it. I mean, he's got two kids and his wife, and they're all living a fairly normal life there, I'd say. Anyway, so then after that, during the pandemic, the Boys Who Said No, it was started by Christopher Columbus Jones and Bill Prince, and they brought me in to make this film, and it turned out it's a really wonderful document about the guys who refused to fight in Vietnam and chose to go to prison. So it really focuses on David Harris and his wife at the time, Joan Baez, and many others, including Steve Ladd, who is my Impact campaign producer on this film and was the producer of that film and one of the producers. And so it's really looks at that whole period and Randy Keeler and all the people who stood up and refused to go to war and made real impact on the prison system.
Who inspired Daniel Ellsberg, as Daniel Ellsberg would
yes.
inspire others.
So it's another loop back to Dan, and Dan's in it because Randy Keeler inspired him to do what he did. So it's all, I think none of these, everyone stands on each other's shoulders in this resistance movement, as you know. There's like nobody who just wakes up one morning and goes, I think I'll just go to prison. No, I mean, I think they're very inspiring people, and they inspire the people around them to take risks and do things that one in their right mind wouldn't do. But suddenly you lose your senses when you see the other side, which few people do, relatively.
We have just about 2 minutes left.
Oh,
Judith
sorry.
Ehrlich, what's the most important thing we should know and do, and how can we follow your work?
Well, I've got a website which desperately needs to be updated, but it's just www.juditherlich.com, which has all my films on it, and not up to date, but I am going to do that. And it's basically watch the film, share it with anybody you know who you think might be interested in helping get this word out, and call your congressperson, write to them, tell them to stop funding the ICBMs and the Sentinel program. And also, I know your organization has a lot of chapters. There's lots of organizations working on this issue, and we're trying to collaborate with them. Back from the Brinks, the biggest one specifically aimed at this. But one more thing. They're going to change a street in Berkeley to Daniel Ellsberg Way. We don't know exactly when the city gets around to making the signs, but it's past all the bureaucratic obstacles except that. And I want to make it into a big event. And Kronos Quartet has agreed to work with us, and we're going to do a parade, etc., and make it into a thing. So we'll keep you posted on that.
We talked about this idea a lot in Roots Action, and we tried to get the street in Santa Monica behind Rand Corporation, but
good idea.
It happened, but to get one in Berkeley, that's
terrific. We're doing it. It's Kittredge Street from past the public library up to Cal, from Berkeley High to Cal.
Wonderful.
So exciting. Yeah.
Much more we could talk about, but we have no more minutes. Our guest has been Judith Ehrlich. You should check out juditherlich.com and anordinaryinsanity.com, and we will have links at talkworldradio.org. Judith, thanks for everything you're doing and for talking with us on Talk World Radio.
Thanks for everything you're doing. Excellent, David. Appreciate your work.
This is Talk World Radio. I'm David Swanson. Take action at rootsaction.org. Help end war at worldbeyondwar.org. Read or listen to today's Peace Almanac entry at peacealmanac.org. All past shows can be heard at talkworldradio.org. Talk World Radio is produced in Charlottesville, Virginia, and syndicated by Pacifica Network. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way.